Hello and welcome back to my studio. It's Lois here from Lois and Morgana Davidson Art, and today I'm going to be showing you an experiment where I tried to paint a hiker on a mountain filled with lots of loose scree and big boulders and rocks, trying to go for atmosphere rather than detail. And I'd love to know what you think of my results. I'll show you how I painted it. It's not a difficult process, it's quite fun, so even beginners can have a go at something like this. This is the photograph that I used from Pixabay. As you can see, it's black and white, and so I've just used my artistic license to use whatever colours I feel will create the best atmosphere, or the atmosphere that I want. But of course you can use any colours that you want. And I'm just trying to create an impression inspired by the photograph rather than copying the photograph exactly. So the first thing I did was just to rough in the simplified shape of where I want my main rocks and mountain features to be. And I've lightly penciled in my figure hiking. I've painted that figure with masking fluid. This is to protect the figure so I can paint freely around and over it. My colours today are Payne's Grey, Indigo, Sepia, Van Dyke Brown, Burnt Sienna and Prussian Blue. I'm using a large enamel roasting tray as a palette, and I'm using Milford cold pressed watercolour paper, which is taped to my board, and my board's at an angle of about 20 degrees. I'm using my large wash brush, which is a Princeton Aqua Elite 1.5 inch modeler brush, but any wash brush will do, to paint over my features, leaving some areas dry, wetting others. When I come then to dab into various paints and get them all onto my brush at the same time, I can use large sweeping brush strokes to create my mountain features loosely and easily. Where the paint hits wet paper, the paint will begin to diffuse. Where the paint hits dry paper, I'll get a harder edge. I shall leave some unpainted areas for some lighter highlights and build up my scene in this way across the paper, working around the figure in the foreground. Now I've roughly positioned most of my rock shapes. I'm dipping into some slightly wetter paint, so a bit more water on my brush, and I'm just going to add in a bit of a sky around those sharper rock features near the top, trying to make sure that I get some sort of misty blends at the top by sort of keeping the edges nice and soft. And now this is my palette knife. It's a size 5 palette knife, and I'm using it to scrape through the rich paint, and this helps me to define some sort of strata lines and textures, to pick out some large boulder and rock shapes, and to maybe create some smaller rock shapes, just working to loosely suggest the scene. Just building up those textures slowly but surely. And now I'm going to paint over my masked hiker, just with some lighter value paint, just to colour the area behind the figure a little bit more so I get more definition to the figure. still keeping it a little bit lighter and more simply painted around the figure so that the figure will stand out a bit more. Scraping in a little bit more smaller rocks around the feet of the figure as well will help it to stand out a bit more. And if I go in closer, you can see that I'm just going to paint a little bit of darker paint over the masking fluid on the figure where there are some slight gaps between the hiker's backpack and clothing, and that darker paint will just sink into those little gaps and give me some definition to the figure. I now need to leave it to dry completely. Now everything's dry, I'm going to remove the masking fluid with this. This is a rubber cement pickup or glue eraser, and it's the ideal tool for removing masking fluid carefully without damaging it. You can of course remove it by rubbing it off with a clean finger. Once I've removed all the masking fluid from my figure, then I can think about painting it in a way so that it stands out from the rock side. So I'm going to use a small calligraphy brush, but any small brush with a good point will do. And using a mixture of the darker colours on my palette, I'm going to paint in most of the features of the figure, but I'm going to create a nice bright orange backpack or rucksack with burnt sienna. Notice how the figure is standing out well against the kind of rock-scree background. This is because there's a lot more detail there and the eye is naturally drawn towards human figures. And because I've deliberately left the area directly in front of the figure fairly plain, so it stands out even more. I'm now going to use some darker colours to deepen up the value around the top of the mountain and here and there around the bottom of the mountain, wherever I think it needs a little bit more tone, just to finish things off. And I think I'm just about happy with that. So I'm now going to remove the tape and see how the painting looks with a clean white border. Somehow when we remove all that sort of messy paint from the edges of the painting and clean up the edges, it looks more finished, and so all this loose brushwork comes together and suggests the scene that we're trying to paint. And I hope you'll agree that this little figure, this hiker here, works really nicely against the big bold brush marks, which sort of suggest these rugged mountain features. So it's sort of using lots of sort of soft edges near the top to give us that sort of misty mountain feel, and sort of harder edges for the boulders, sort of fairly random shapes that all come together to create this scene. I think painting freely with plenty of rich paint, large bold brush marks, creating texture and light is a really good way to experiment and to get used to using paint in a very free, loose way. So don't be afraid to have a go at this. Don't be afraid to fail with it. It might take a little while to work out how you enjoy painting these kinds of big bold brush strokes, the colours that you like to use. Of course, these are my colours. They won't be for everyone, but I really enjoy painting with them. So why not have a go at experimenting and see what you can come up with? If you enjoyed this demo, why not take a look at my book, Landscapes in Watercolour, Techniques and Tutorials for the Complete Beginner. It covers all the basics that you need to get you started with watercolour landscape painting and 10 tutorials, 5 pure watercolour and 5 ink and watercolour. So if you're interested in that, then please follow the link below. Well, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then please click on the thumbs up button. And if you're not subscribed to our channel, then I'll invite you to do so. It's free and it really helps us with our reach. And thank you so much to all our supporters on Patreon. If you're interested in exclusive content and supporting us on Patreon, then there are links for that in the description below as well. I'll see you again soon. Take care and happy painting. Bye.